I'm Rachel.
And I'm Lauren.
Welcome back to Capital Conversations with Rachel and Lauren.
This week we'll be talking about the possible government shutdown and lawmakers leaving Washington. After that, we'll have an interview with Representative Chip Roy, and we'll talk about our lives on the Hill.
Welcome back, everybody. We are excited to be here for another episode. And once again, the topic of today's episode, and I feel like the rest of our lives, is government shutdown, government funding, appropriations. And I think we talk about this all the time, that so many people don't really know what government shutdown is. They don't even know how the government is funded.
Yeah, they don't know that we pretty much fund it every 3 months in this thing called a continuing resolution or a CR.
Yeah, and it's the CR, like all these acronyms that we just kind of use in random conversation. I find myself at home telling family about it. They're asking me what's kind of going on in Washington. And I'm like, we have to pass a CR. And they're like, we don't know what the heck that means. Yeah. And I'm like, that's just quite another thing to put in the tally column of terms that we use all the time.
We can do a whole rant on that.
Yes.
I feel very passionately about the use of acronyms in DC, and its ability to keep a lot of people out of politics.
Yes, I agree.
I could go on and on about that.
Next episode.
Yes.
And I think the thing that we have found over the last, kind of as you said, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, however long these CRs or these deals are. That's the biggest way to say it. They're just deals. They're just deals on a piece of paper that tell you where the funding numbers are going to go. And so I think what we're seeing with these deals, though, it's kind of just the same story every time. It always comes down to this partisan fight. It always comes down to Republicans wanting one thing, Democrats wanting another. And the result of that is this kind of deadlock.
Yeah.
Where nobody is making any progress. And I think that that's what we're seeing right now. We saw last week that Donald Trump canceled a meeting with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and that was kind of a big deal because that was supposed to be one thing that people were like, maybe we could get somewhere. Yeah. Because right now, this deal has not made any ground. It failed in the Senate a couple weeks ago. There hasn't been any really negotiations between both sides.
Yeah, which there does have to be negotiations because, so essentially a CR, like we said, is a continuing resolution. The proposed one right now is for 6 weeks, and it is what we call a clean CR. So a clean CR essentially just extends the current funding levels however long that the CR, sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's a year-long clean CR. And it essentially just extends the funding that was appropriated however long ago, the last time that 12 appropriations bills were passed, which is really hard, much harder than you would ever think.
It's been a long time since all 12 appropriations bills have been passed. I think since the 1990s.
I think it was in 97 was the last time that all 12 appropriations bills were passed on the deadline. They have since then, all 12 appropriations bills have been passed, just not by the original deadline without a short-term continuing resolution.
Yeah, some of them have been in a CR, some of them have been in a appropriations package where they kind of put all 6 of them in something. There's been times where we have seen just the bills either come out of committee, all 12 of them, but then only 2 make it to the floor. Yeah. And so I think that that's where Republicans over the last couple cycles have found themselves stuck in, is that you've gotten some of these bills that are actually pretty bipartisan that have come out of committee, and you've gotten a giant number of Republicans and Democrats who have voted for or against it. Then you have to put it before the whole House. You have to put it before the whole Senate.
Which isn't even, the House isn't the full problem.
No, the House for once in its life, the House is not the problem this time. So well done for them.
Really any bill. The House passes it with simple majority, whereas once it gets to the Senate, it has to pass a 60-vote threshold, which is where we're kind of at this gridlock right now. Republicans have a trifecta, as we've said a million times on this show. So they have passed it with a simple majority in the House, but in the Senate, they do have to reach that 60-vote threshold, and Democrats haven't gotten any wins since Trump took office. I don't know if you feel differently about that, but I feel like they have honestly they probably feel like a punching bag at this point. They've had a rescissions package, which codified cuts to stuff that Congress appropriated in years previously.
And we talked about that in a previous episode where Democrats, when it's so funny to think that a couple episodes ago we were in the same situation, but now, as opposed to that deadline coming up, in 2 months, it's at our doorstep.
Yes.
And I think that it is interesting because a lot of people don't even really know where the state of play is right now. They just know that in a few days, in a few months, we could be in a shutdown or still in a shutdown.
Yeah.
And so I think for people who are wondering like where even the state of play is, it's pretty actually simple. Republicans are arguing that this clean CR will just basically not pause funding, but like keep everything just level.
Where it is. Keep it
Keep
exactly
it
where it is right now.
So they have 7 weeks to keep talking, basically. Their frame of reference is, why don't we just pass this, get it on the table, get it off our desks, and then we can keep talking for 7 weeks, and then we will have a solution to these appropriations bills. But Democrats are saying that they need to have some incentive for several reasons, like we've talked about before. Rescissions cut funds in these appropriations bills. So why would they vote for something that's going to be taken away?
Could just be taken away with another simple majority. So a rescissions package is passed not by the 60 vote threshold in the Senate, but by a simple majority. And so when these rescissions packages are crafted by the White House, it really does undermine Congress's power of the purse, because Congress did pass these bills through appropriations processes, and then the White House essentially makes this package to cut that funding that was already agreed upon either like in years past or like multiple years ago. So they're like, essentially, why would we pass this bill that the White House could turn around next year and be like, oh, here's another rescission package, cut what they made a deal on last year.
Yeah, and I think then on the other side, Republicans are arguing that Democrats have voted for clean CRs in the past.
Which they have.
And that is a fair argument to make.
Yes.
And I think the thing that maybe a lot of people who don't live in this area are wondering, they're like, well, Republicans didn't vote for the CR last time, and now they want a CR. Vice versa, Democrats voted for it last time, Republicans didn't. The best, most simple answer that you can give is that it matters who's in the White House. Like, and it sounds so simple, but like, of course Republicans are going to vote for a clean CR because their president is in the White House.
Yeah.
When it was Biden, why would they give Biden any wins? So, and then Democrats.
Same goes for Democrats right now. Because
I mean,
this is pretty much an extension of Biden funding levels if you look at it that way, but voting for a CR at this point in time when things are so politicized, it is like giving a win to the president in the White House, and whenever they feel like they're taking loss after loss, I don't think that they're willing to give whatever president it is at that point a win.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Democratic voters have said that they want to see their party doing more. We saw that at the end of the 2024 election. Some people thought that people were too extreme. A majority of voters said that they didn't think that the party did enough to prevent Trump from coming back in the White House. Well, Trump's in the White House now. And so now they have to recalibrate.
3 years.
So that's 3 years. Yeah. So they have to recalibrate and think, okay, well, with virtually no political power, what do we have to fight back? And so I think that the base wants to see Democrats really putting their foot down. I will say that I think a lot of the voting base wants them to put their foot down because they don't understand what a government shutdown actually is.
Yes.
I think in people's minds, and I think I thought this too, like in college, where the government shutdown is like, you think of the Congress like going dark and like it just like one of those blackouts in those TV shows that you see. Like, I think that that's what people think a government shutdown is, but it's not. In fact, more people are in Congress because they are trying to get themselves out of this hole every minute, every day.
Yeah, the Hill's going to be working overtime if we go into a government shutdown to reopen the government. So I think that it is, like you said, very different from what my perception of it was as a kid or like in high school and college.
And you said you had a unique experience about government shutdowns because, in my town, there isn't like a federal workforce, huge population. There might be some pockets here and there, and especially in Illinois, there are, but coming from maybe like a small town or from a town that had a lot of people in different places, you said that you had people who were working at NASA, I think.
Like, I always thought that a government shutdown just affected the entire country and that everyone felt the effects of a government shutdown because I grew up at the NASA exit in Houston. And so every single person on my street growing up worked at NASA, which is considered federal workers.
Yeah.
So when the government shut down in, was it 2013?
Yeah.
They were all home from work. And I remember being like, oh my God, my friend's parents aren't at work. But that just really isn't the reality of the whole country whenever a government shutdown happens. Really, a lot of people do feel the effects, and I don't want to undermine that at all because when a government shutdown does happen, those workers do have to continue to work. They just don't get paid, which they do get paid later for their work. But it is hard because when people are paying paycheck to paycheck, that could be 2 weeks,
Yeah.
4 weeks, 6 weeks without a paycheck. People have rent to pay, people have food to put on the table. And so that's where that kind of comes in to play, that it makes federal workers' lives hard for like however long that the government ends up being shut down. But not everyone across the country feels the effects of that government shutdown.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too about the shutdown is that it really is something that kind of just impacts our bubble for the time being.
Yeah.
Because what it does is it keeps lawmakers in Washington, and they can't really travel. They can't. So anyone who's campaigning for another office, they can't. Anyone who is trying to get home to their districts, they really can't, because they have to be in this work period. And the longest government shutdown in U.S. history actually happened under the first Trump administration. It was from the end of 2018 until 2019. It was 35 days. And so the fact that 35 days is the longest shutdown in U.S. history tells you that this does not happen very often. And when it does, it's a very ultimate last resort, because people cannot get along. And I think that that is so interesting, and it just plays to the partisan environment that we're in right now, because not only are there small majorities, so you can't pass things. This would be a totally different story if Republicans had 61, 62 seats in the Senate, 30-seat majority in the House. This would not even be a conversation.
No.
They'd pass it, Democrats would be pissed, and then, we'd move on. But because there are these narrow margins, it is making, I would honestly argue that it is actually making the process a lot more valuable, because it's forcing Republicans and Democrats to come together and actually negotiate.
Somewhat.
There's a caveat.
Like we said, President Trump had scheduled a meeting with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and he ended up canceling the meeting,
a day later?
24 hours later? I don't even know. It was very soon after. That was honestly going to be really interesting to cover. I don't think I knew what I was going to expect from that meeting when it was going to happen. But those negotiations at some point are going to have to happen, because, like we said, there's a 60-vote threshold, and we can't keep the government shut down forever. So, this is valuable time that these lawmakers are having to come together to negotiate something that is detrimental. That doesn't happen that often in Congress.
No, and I think it's very, very rarely do we report and do we follow meetings that don't happen. Because if something doesn't happen, then it's not really news. But I think the fact that this meeting did not happen.
Good point.
Yeah, but I think the fact that this meeting did not happen is one of those rare moments where it is news that it was news to begin with that the president was like, let's go, Democrats, come meet me at the White House.
Because has Trump met with the leaders?
No,
not from
to
my,
our
not
knowledge.
From my knowledge.
There's been no meeting, and so this would have been maybe the first time that they've met under this second administration, or maybe for some of them the first time ever in person. And so I think that was kind of an interesting step towards maybe bipartisanship. And then, like you said, within 24 hours it was canceled, and there were some reports that the Speaker Johnson and Leader Thune, who are the Republican leaders in the Senate and House, they pressured Trump to not have this meeting, because in their mind they were saying Democrats have been very clear about these demands. So if any of these demands are agreed upon, that could be bad for Republicans. And so what are those demands? That's what I think a lot of people are also wondering, is what are Democrats doing right now? I think a lot of people are confused. Why are Democrats
Rightfully
doing this?
So. I'm a little bit confused.
And I'm a little bit confused. And it all kind of stems from healthcare, which that has been kind of the theme of this
since Trump took office.
Yes, is healthcare. And we will not pretend to be healthcare experts.
No, don't.
But the crux of it is that the Affordable Care Act tax credits that millions of Americans are on, it was a COVID era, Biden era provision that is set to expire in December, at the end of December. Democrats want there to be action now. They arguably have a point that very rarely getting things done at the last minute goes in anybody's favor, aka reconciliation, aka every CR ever. So they have a good point there. And so they want to see action now, and they want to see it done in a bipartisan way. Republicans have said that this is a funding issue, but ACA is a policy issue, and we should not be putting those two together. Also kind of a valid point. They want to just get the CR done and passed so they can keep negotiating. But I think that right now, the reconciliation bill has made everything so dire.
That's what I was about to say. I think that obviously, with the expiration date coming up, it was already going to be on Democrats' minds. But the reconciliation bill, which we have talked about, again, time and time again, it made a lot of reforms to Medicaid that was probably the biggest point of contingency, not only between Democrats and Republicans, but between different factions in the Republican Party.
Yes.
The reconciliation bill added work requirements that will go into effect in 2026 that essentially will kick a lot of people off Medicaid that are on Medicaid right now in December of 2026. And so I think that Democrats are already worried about healthcare and already so fired up on the healthcare subject that this funding fight just like adds fuel to the fire.
And I think that the messaging tactics from both sides has been interesting. We've seen Democrats blame Republicans for a shutdown. We've seen Republicans blame Democrats. Like, everyone has a different idea of whose fault it is. And there's some validity to both of those. So historically, voters have blamed the party in power. And I think a lot of voters this time around are going to blame Republicans again.
I think that's just the way that it plays out, though. If you're an everyday American at home and the government's shutting down, you're like, oh, who's in the White House? President Trump is in the White House.
Who controls Congress? Republicans. You're like, oh, so then it's their fault.
And you don't really, I don't think I knew that there was a 60 vote threshold for government funding. So I think that it is a really big task for Republicans to message a shutdown if there is one.
And I think on the other side too, Democrats do run that risk of being blamed for the shutdown because they do need to provide the votes to get that 60 vote threshold. And so some people might be thinking, well, why can't you just compromise? And I think Democrats' messaging on that is we've been compromising since Trump got in office, and life is not getting better for Americans. And come 2026, it's going to get worse. Yeah. And so I think that all of these little things that we're seeing, which it's crazy to think of a government shutdown as a little thing, but like with the March spending fight that happened, and then reconciliation, and now this, once we hit 2026, it's kind of like an echo or like a ripple in the pool. You're going to see how it might be kind of tiny right now, but it will have major ramifications come 2026, because if the economy doesn't get better by the time the midterms come around, if the Medicaid reforms stay exactly the way they are under reconciliation, that is going to be a huge fueling fire for people who want to come out and vote. And again,
also with federal workers, whenever thousands and thousands of federal workers were laid off or fired at the beginning of Trump's presidency, there was an uproar, and a way that the White House is kind of trying to make moves right now is through a memo released by the Office of Management and Budget last week. And they essentially said that if the government goes into a shutdown, that there would be a big layoff round in the government, in the federal workforce, as part of their agenda to cut down the federal workforce. That's part of their bigger agenda, but they did kind of put that out at an odd time, coming right after the canceled negotiations meeting with Democrats. I think that
it wasn't the best look.
Yes, I think that federal workers is hard messaging, because Democrats really like to empathize with federal workers, and if they're the ones feeling the effects of this, I think that 2026 that'll be a major issue.
Yeah, and I think there's another problem too, and I think that's the theme of the government shutdown, is that
that's
there's several
everything here.
Everything's a problem. Everything's an issue because it's so back and forth, because everything's so partisan nowadays. I think another issue that Democrats are running into is that most people in the U.S. don't give a damn about the federal workforce, and not to minimize how important the federal workforce is across not just the DMV, but in our home states and in other states. It is a very important. It's one of the backbones, several of the American society. But a lot of everyday voters don't care about the federal workforce,
or just don't realize that. I think that it's more
or they don't even know.
They don't have that personal connection to the federal workforce, that it's kind of hard to empathize with something that you're not familiar with.
Yeah, and I think you'll see Democrats and Republicans argue that they want to see smaller government. It's a theme that, that's typically more of a Republican mindset, but there are some conservative Democrats, some centrists, and even some progressives who have said that they want to see less government involvement in their affairs. And so I think when people are looking at the federal workforce and they're saying, oh, well, they're being laid off or they're not getting paid, some of their reactions good, they're getting paid too much money of my taxpayer dollars or whatever. But I think that it is one of those things that will have to be played out in messaging very carefully between Republicans and Democrats.
From both sides.
Because as much as maybe the federal bureaucrats, as Republicans like to call them, as much as they can kind of message off of that for a while and say that Democrats care more about that than farmers or whatever, I think kind of what you said, you will see come 2026 that could be a major thing. Now, that's also not to say that a shutdown could occur until 2026.
Yeah.
But, I mean, anything's possible. And everybody's already broken so many records.
Yeah, this Congress has broken any record that you can think of.
Yes.
The longest vote record in the Senate, Senator Cory Booker held the longest floor speech in the House.
Jeffries had the longest magic minute, which basically a magic minute allowed him to talk for as long as he
8 minutes,
wanted.
or not 8 minutes.
8 minutes
hours.
would have been glorious.
Yes.
8 hours was long. And yes, we were there for all of that. If you were wondering if we were sitting there listening to him, yes, we were.
Whenever I sat down in the gallery at 4:30, I never in a million years thought that it was going to go on for 8 hours.
We had to take turns.
4:30 a.m.
Swap
Let's
yes, let's
clarify
caveat that a.m. So I think that what's so interesting about this is that basically the best way you can put it is that Congress is a dysfunctional mess. And I think that that is why we're seeing so many lawmakers who are knee deep in this fight are kind of on their way out. And they're saying, we've done so much here, we need to be done. They're tired. And they're like, we have done so much. We have fought back against more. For Republicans, they're like, we have fought against more spending. We want to see fiscal conservatism. For some Democrats, they are like, we are in a spot where we have no power. We might as well get out and go somewhere where we do.
Like I said, they feel like they're a punching bag. I think that's kind of the vibe I've gotten from a lot of them. Anyone that is looking at leaving, they're just tired.
They're tired. And that comes from Republicans also feel like a punching bag, too.
That also comes from both sides. Like, it doesn't matter whoever is in the minority just feels that way. Like, that is just like a fact of being in the minority, is that you just kind of take losses all around, especially in a trifecta. It wears on them. They're spending months and weeks and days away from their spouses, their kids, their friends, their family, to just essentially take loss after loss. And you kind of, I think a lot of times it is easy to lose sight for them of like what they're fighting for when they're taking loss after loss, which does lead into a lot of retirements or going back to run for higher office in their states.
Yeah, and I think for Republicans, especially fiscal conservatives, we have seen a lot of them over the last couple years. They have been kind of the rabble-rousers and the knife in the side of their own leadership because they want to see change and they want to see it now. And I think that that's what maybe some people who are outside of DC are wondering, like, oh, well, why can't we just fund the government? Why can't we just get it done? Why can't we just cut spending? It sounds so easy, but then when you are a lawmaker, it's very difficult to get a lot of people on your side for that. Because DC, like, I think a lot of everyone is obsessed with appeasing Washington. Yeah. And not as many anymore are looking to appease their districts. And so we are seeing kind of a wave of retirements right now. And there was a wave of them last year. It happens every year.
It does. It is not uncommon.
It's not uncommon, but it does just show but I think what is a very signature part of this year is who is leaving.
Yes.
Because we've seen quite a few who have already
honestly,
announced.
they're the chatty ones.
Yeah.
I would say that
I'm a little sad that they're leaving.
I
I'm
know.
like, who am I going to bug in the hallways now?
Who's just going to talk talk to us?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that a lot of the big personalities in Congress are leaving, which does leave gaps for people to come up and fill them. But it also kind of leaves us like, where's the House going?
Yeah, and I think we don't know. And I think that that's what's so interesting about the government shutdown too, is that we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know, if it's going to occur at all. I think that we will only see with time where the government is going, and it can be very complicated. And a lot of times people from home ask me, what's the likelihood of a government shutdown? What happens? Is it bad if we go into a shutdown? A lot of times I don't really have the answer for them, because I don't think a lot of us have the answer. I think that we are in unprecedented times every minute of the day. And until, maybe some of these people who are leaving Congress allow for new leadership to come up and they grow and they make things more bipartisan. Or it could be a case where some of the people who are the most loud, like Congressman Chip Roy or Congressman Ralph Norman, like they were very key players in reconciliation. They have been key players for a long time.
For a lot of things,
It's very possible that when they're gone, people are going to realize that they were the ones who were fighting for whatever subsect that they were looking for.
I do think that a lot of the members that I talked to about this, though, have a lot of faith in the people upcoming. I think that one of the only comments that somebody made was Congressman Feenstra, he's running for governor. He made a comment that was like, it is hard whenever a lot of these people who've been in the institution so long retire because they have such good institutional knowledge that they bring to the table, which is experience, and having experience does help. But then he had a caveat along with Congressman Roy or Norman, who said that a lot of these, like what they kept calling new blood, is a good thing. Like they're also going to provide these fights. They're new, and I think that as much as they're going to be timid at first, they're willing to fight, and obviously they want to do this job for a reason.
And I think to kind of then go back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, where Democrats are really wanting to see their people in Washington fighting for them. I think that new blood mentality is not just something that Republicans have a monopoly on. A lot of Democrats, a lot of younger grassroots candidates want to see, honestly, people like Chuck Schumer out of the way.
Fight fire with fire. I think that would be, if I had to pick a mantra for young Democrats right now, I think that it would be that desire to what they are calling fight fire with fire.
Absolutely, because if Chuck Schumer decides to work with Republicans again, they did that in March, that could be bad for him, and it also could just be bad for the party.
I think it would be. I think we can say it would be bad from not necessarily. We don't know what like his next election is going to look like. We don't even know if he's running. He hasn't completely said yet. But the clapback that he got from the party back earlier this year, whenever he helped Republicans fund the government, was kind of massive.
Yeah, and I think that we will just have to see him let it play out to see where the chips all align. But there is a lot on the line for both parties. I think that that's something that a lot of people need to know, is that it will not be one side's fault completely.
No,
I think that it is very naive to say
that's the way to.
It's very naive to say that one party would be wholly responsible for a shutdown.
Yeah.
And so that is something that I think we will be tracking to see what messaging sticks, what messaging doesn't, and whether parties are willing to accept the fact that maybe along the way they made some mistakes.
I think that's being a little bit hopeful for them, but
we'll see.
We'll see.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, coming up next, we have an interview with Congressman Chip Roy.
Congressman Roy, thank you so much for joining us on Capitol Conversations today.
Great to be with you all. Hope you're doing well.
Absolutely. It's definitely been such a busy session since we've come back from August recess. It feels like years ago, but also it feels like it happened in the blink of an eye. And there's been so much going on. And I feel like the biggest thing that's happened to you personally is the Texas race. If you want to talk a little bit about what your future plans look like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, look, I'm in my fourth term in Congress. It's been a great honor serving what I always describe as the best district in the best state and best country in the history of the world in Central Texas. And particularly this year in the wake of the Kerrville floods, where I spent so much time with the people that I represent and the people that were hurt by that terrible tragedy. And I have to be honest that combined with a number of other things led me to my current position of running for the office of the Attorney General of the state of Texas. I'm a former federal prosecutor, former first assistant attorney general. My great-great-grandfather was a Texas Ranger back in the 1870s. My grandfather was the chief of police of a small Texas town in West Texas, Sweetwater. And look, I happen to believe that Texas is central to the preservation of this great republic. Obviously, I feel strongly about Texas. And we need to stand up and fight and defend Texas. A whole lot of people are coming to Texas. A whole lot of people are doing things to Texas that, frankly, is not consistent with who we are as Texans. We've got all of these groups that I've talked about, and we're going to, I think, talk about this more in a minute. But all these radical leftist groups that are putting criminals out on our streets in Austin and San Antonio, Houston and Dallas. We got to stop that. We got to stop the impact of the open borders. President Trump has done a great job shutting those down, but we can't be subject to the whims of a future Biden administration. We got to make sure we preserve and protect Texas. So I'm coming back, running for AG. We've got a great start, raising money and great lead in the polls. Polls show us in a very strong position. But the most important thing is standing up and restoring law and order and the rule of law in the state of Texas. And I've tried to do that from my positions on the House Judiciary Committee and other places in Washington. But it's time to come home to Texas. And my son's 16, my daughter's 14. And I want to spend a little bit more time with them as well. So we're looking forward to it. But look, I got 15 more months in my position in Washington, and we got a lot of work to do in D.C. too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but the House is obviously losing a lot of big players with
Mm.
you and Ralph Norman and Nancy Mace and Dusty Johnson, and the list kind of just goes on in the House GOP of really just like major players and major personalities leaving. What do you think that Congress is going to look like without y'all? I mean, that's two big people on the Rules Committee. There's just like a lot of people that are heading back to their states.
Well, what you're seeing, I think, is the product of the people who have been trying to lead change in Washington, who have put their stamp on the House of Representatives to make it better. You mentioned Ralph and myself on Rules Committee. Tom Tiffany yesterday just announced that he's running for governor. Andy Biggs, my friend from Arizona, Byron Donalds going back to Florida. The vast majority of these people we're talking about, Dusty notwithstanding, who's a good friend, but you talked about Freedom Caucus people who went to Washington to change it. And we have been changing it. The good news is there's a lot of new, fresh faces that have been jumping into the fray that are leading and trying to change Washington. But we've got to spread this across the country. We've got the State Freedom Caucus Network. We've got conservatives running across the country. But I'm proud to come back to Texas, as all those individuals are proud to go home. The House is going to be fine. There's been, I don't know, what, 17,000 of us or something like that that have gone up there and served. There'll be, hundreds more in the coming years. And we need to refresh who goes to Washington. It's not supposed to be a permanent job. With all due respect to those members that sit up there for 40 years, you're not supposed to do that. The founders wanted us to represent the people. I don't mind people going up there and serve for, 10, 15, 20. I'm not saying you got to leave after 8. What I'm saying is it shouldn't be permanent. Let's refresh and get new people up there, people who can see why it's been so badly broken for so long. The entrenched interests in Washington are the problem, not the people.
And I feel like the house has become kind of this ball of chaos. There's always something happening. And then when you go home to states, I know when we travel to states for campaign coverage, everything's just so much quieter. And everyone, you just get to meet the voters and you realize that the chaos of DC is not the main event of the world. What is like one thing that maybe you're not going to miss about DC, but then also something you might find yourself missing down the road?
Yeah, I'm not going to miss traveling to DC every week and being away from my family. It's tough. My wife's a saint. My kids go to a school with a network of people around them that has been great. But it's tough when I see them, leave on a Monday, go to school. I do a volunteer thing as a dad, a curb service thing. But if I can do it once a week, I'm lucky on Monday, and then I leave, and then my son and daughter going, when are you going to be home? And the answer is Thursday night at best, Friday, Saturday morning, and
Mhm.
that's tough. But I will miss the camaraderie. I've spent a lot of my time up there building coalitions. You talked about sort of the chaos and the sort of give and take in Washington, but that's also part of the design, right?
Yeah.
I'm 1/435th of one half of 1/3 of the federal government's decision making apparatus, and you got to build coalitions. I'm proud of what we've done. Yeah, there's going to be some chaos. There ought to be. You got to get in there and fight and mix it up and present ideas. But then you got to be able to be willing to go build the coalition to get it done. I've been proud that in my career is I think I'm known to be outspoken and
Mhm.
known to be conservative and known to want to fight and then say no on certain things. I'm also, I think, known to say yes, that we've got to be able to come together and figure out how we're going to build 218 in this current climate with a 2, 3, 4 seat majority. We never know what the majority is. It changes all the time. So I don't know
Every
whether
day.
it's a two
Yeah.
or 3 or 4 seat.
We
You
have
know,
to, it's hard for us
but
to keep track too.
I know I'm like, wait, how many votes do we need this week? But that stuff. Look, is part of the art of this deal. Working with the speaker, working with my colleagues in the Freedom Caucus, working with the whip, working with committee chairman, and figuring out how to deliver. I actually enjoy that. But honestly, the AG, you have to do a lot of that too. You got to build coalition with others, other offices of attorneys general across the country, and you have to build coalitions within your own state to deliver. And it's something I enjoy doing, and it's a strength, I think.
Yeah. I mean, speaking on the design of chaos, I think that we're kind of about to reach one of those crossroads whenever it comes to chaos, not only in the House, but now also in the Senate, just kind of the chaos of Washington and everything that we have seen in the last, I don't even know how many years we've done a continuing resolution because it's well beyond when I've been cognizant of
Same with
politics.
me.
Um, but can you just talk about a little bit about where we're at with government funding?
why it is always so chaotic and why this cycle like continuously continues.
So I don't even want to talk about when you all became cognizant of politics because it'll really date me. But you know, I've been been doing this for a while as a staffer as all far back as 2003 on the Senate Judiciary Committee. But I bring that up because I've seen the kind of ebb and flow of the place, and like there's nothing really new under the sun. There's just different flavors of the same thing. Yes, we're in a contentious time. Yes, we're in a fairly ideologically divided time, but it's not the first time. And so all we're seeing right now is that play out. When you have, as I said before, a 2 or 3 seat majority in the House, when you've got 7 Democrat votes you've got to get in the Senate, when you've got a division and an animosity towards the president, as you see from the Democrats, or when Biden was there, obviously we were not happy with Biden. We were not happy with open borders. We were not happy with what they were doing. So you're going to have tension. What you're seeing now with the CR back and forth, every year for as long as I can remember, there's been a struggle to try to figure out how to get the appropriations process done. We were trying to fight for regular order, you'll remember, about 2 or 3 years ago when we were going through the speaker's battle. We made some good changes. And in fact, we advanced the ball. And even today, even this fall, you know, we've passed a number of the appropriations bills, either out of committee or off the floor. We now have an agreement with the Senate to take 3 to conference. Hell, we haven't done that in a long time. That's a good move towards trying to change the process back to regular order. But we don't have the government funded yet, right? Because we have differences of opinion on policies and on spending levels. We want to hold spending flat. This is why, by the way, I disagree with some of my conservative colleagues. I like CRs when you've got the president of your party in the office because a CR holds spending in check. If I can get a CR for like a decade and grow the economy, then we'll actually get to a responsibly, closer to a responsibly balanced budget. But we're not there yet. So we think that we should do this CR. Look, I would have liked to have done a year-long CR or a 6-month CR, not a, 6 or 7 week CR. But look, you got to build the coalitions, like I said before. The president and a bunch of my colleagues wanted that. So I took the win, right? It was a win to hold spending at check, and which we've done now for 2 years? We've been holding spending at roughly the 2024 levels. Again, that's a win from a fiscal conservative perspective. And from the standpoint of the policies, the president is now there. So I trust this administration to carry out the policies. So now we'll work through October. Well, by the way, if Democrats are going to shut down, that's on them, right? Chuck Schumer is choosing a shutdown actively. And I got to say the irony of this. You all may not remember in 2013, but that's when we had Ted Cruz, I was his chief of staff, who went to the floor and said, no, we're going to not fund government. We're going to defund Obamacare because we didn't want to implement what we knew would be a broken healthcare system. Democrats cried foul and said, you can't hijack spending to try to say that we shouldn't have Obamacare implemented. Well, what are Democrats doing right now? They want to hijack spending. We passed the bill out of the House, sent it to the Senate to keep government funded. They want to hijack it so they can prop up broken, expansive Biden subsidies that will enrich insurance companies, $40 billion a year to insurance companies, so they can prop up their broken system that is bankrupting our healthcare system and making it impossible for hardworking families to afford healthcare. So that's the fight in front of us. Schumer has chosen the fight. We'll see if he sticks to that. But I have no problem taking that fight to the American people.
And I think that's really interesting because, as you mentioned, that the CR fight has been playing. I mean, I was not around in 2013, unfortunately, so I was not privy to that. But I think it's interesting to hear about how this is just kind of the latest check mark in a long list of ideological fights over things like spending or other things that are going on. And so for voters and for like people like who listen to our show and who don't even really know like what a CR is or even like what this shutdown means, can you talk a little bit about like how this kind of just flops from party to party? And if you ever think that maybe eventually Congress could come to a situation where we're meeting in the middle, negotiations are happening, and it kind of goes more smoothly.
Well, look, we have to agree on the mission. And as I just described, we have a very strong disagreement on the mission between our Democrat colleagues and Republicans. And not saying that all Republicans agree or that all Democrats agree on every single thing, but there's a pretty strong divide between the two parties. We believe we need fiscal constraint, spending reductions, and efforts to balance our budget. We believe that. We believe that we need what I call healthcare freedom. We need to empower patients and doctors to drive down the price of healthcare and stop propping up insurance companies and massive monopolistic hospital conglomerates, not to mention pharma. My Democratic colleagues apparently want to continue this crony capitalistic system with the government just throwing money at insurance companies to tell you which doctor you can go to. I'm sure you enjoy so much when you want to go get health care that you have to go to an insurance company and call and go, wait, which doctor's in network? Wait, who can I go to? How much will that cost? What's my copay? How much do I, what's my deductible? It's insane. No rational people would set up a healthcare system that way. Yet my Democratic colleagues are not just committed to it, they're committed to that and more. They want the government to run it. I want you to run it and a doctor. I want you to go to direct primary care. Now, I know this isn't a healthcare, podcast, but that's a ideological and philosophical strong divide. So you ask, well, can we all ever come together? Well, if we can agree to the mission. Now, usually when push comes to shove and people start freaking out about the government shutting down, which, by the way, it doesn't really shut down. Like 80% of the operations and funding continue, and ultimately all the bureaucrats are paid. But at the end of the day, if you're going to push up to the brink of shutdown, then usually a unity kind of builds to say, well, I guess we got to fund the government. I don't know that we should play those politics. That's why, an automatic CR is not a bad thing. Just say, look, we're just going to keep funding it at current levels, and it'll automatically kick in and hold spending in check. And then you have a debate and say, guys, if you want us to move off of the mark of holding spending flat, then let's have a discussion about the policies. Maybe we can compromise. We want X, you want Y, but we're going to hold spending in check and we're going to figure out these policies. But right now, there's just a philosophical divide. And I don't mind us having to play that brinkmanship because it's one of the few leverage points you have every year to try to force change.
And we have, I think, another interesting saga that's occurring right now where we're seeing, speaking of ideological divides, there was a huge kind of separation between people's responses to the Charlie Kirk assassination. And we've seen the majority of people on both sides condemn the political violence, say that it's, irrecoverably horrible, but there were some people that, and you have been leading kind of the charge on this, that you were wanting to investigate for not the Charlie Kirk assassination, but just in general rhetoric, inciting political violence, things like that. Can you talk a little bit about this proposal, whether it's gotten any legs, and if you think it's a helpful thing to do in a time when everyone's kind of saying like, all right, everyone, like, cool it?
Yeah, and look, first of all, many of us are still reeling from what we saw unfold less than 2 weeks ago with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Charlie was a friend. My first thought was having to call my 16-year-old son and say, hey, and he's not on social media, but, friends in school would be, say, don't watch whatever clips people are pushing around. Just don't do it. Because he was a fan and he would listen to Charlie when I would send him some different things to listen to. But, where we stand as a country, okay, separate from Charlie and what happened to him, we stand at a place where it is very clear to me, sitting as a member of the House Judiciary Committee, chairman of the subcommittee on the Constitution, that there is an active network of radical leftists who are trying to undermine the American way of life. That is an undeniable truth. We have the reality of things like the Wren Collective and George Soros-funded DAs and prosecutors and judges who are putting people onto the street who have no business being on the street, who have a coordinated effort for cashless bail and for releasing people and not prosecuting people. And it is coordinated and purposeful. We have an entire coordinated effort and network of people to release and draw people into the United States from other countries and release them. Now, this administration has currently got that part in check, but they're still out there. They're still trying to protect people who are here illegally. They're trying to continue to build networks to be able to have people ready to come to our country. That's why we had the gang members from Venezuela and others flooding into our country. We've got an organized effort from radical leftists with the Southern Poverty Law Center and Antifa and others that are targeting conservatives and Republicans. We saw what happened when the Family Research Council was shot up 10 years ago, 12 years ago, right there in Washington, D.C., and a security guard was shot. Southern Poverty Law Center targeted the Family Research Council. Southern Poverty Law Center targeted Charlie Kirk and other friends just this year. I could keep going, but that radical network of Marxists and leftists, they're trying to dismantle Western civilization and the American way of life. When you add to that the advancement of Sharia law and organized efforts of the Islamists in the United States, you've got a very serious problem. I think Congress should address it. So my question for the speaker, my question for the chairman of committees who don't like to have things like I've put forward, a special select committee to go seek out and find the truth on what's going on with these organized networks that are targeting our way of life. What is their solution? Is it to have one more token hearing and then walk away? Or are we going to do something to actually expose this for the American people? That's my question for the Republican leadership in Washington. I don't like sitting still. I don't like having a hearing and then putting out a few tweets. I want to expose it to the American people. I want to inform the Trump administration. I want to break up their networks. When I'm the Attorney General of Texas, I want to seek out and destroy these networks that are undermining freedom, undermining security, undermining the American dream, putting criminals on the street, putting criminals in our country, advancing Sharia law that's contrary to our values. I want to defend the people that I love in the communities that I live in. So that's the purpose of what we're trying to do with this committee. And again, we've got 40 people on that letter. It's an open letter and growing. And so if for my other colleagues, the other 3/4 of the Republican conference that aren't on the letter, why not? And what is your solution? More of the same? Because I'm tired of it.
And when you are having these conversations with your Republican colleagues, especially in the wake of the assassination and just in general, is there any concern among you or among your colleagues that things that are happening in this country, this political violence and this increasing rhetoric, is undermining the work that Congress can be doing? Because obviously Congress has a lot of jobs to do. You got government funding, you got other things that are happening. Do you think that this committee could help try to solve the problem so you don't have to deal with it anymore? Because I think that might be some people's concerns, that they're like, oh, we don't want to bring it to light. There's too much to do. It's kind of just part of our DNA. Do you think that there is a way that this committee could kind of break it down so that way eventually maybe everything can come back to the middle and not be so temperature high?
Well, look, I think, hold on. Sorry. Stop. Hey, Millie, stop. Sorry.
That's okay. We can have an extra guest on the show.
Millie, knock it off. Okay.
I think we should leave it in. I think it should be part of the show.
No, I'm good with it. Look, here's the thing. Some people would say that what you just asked, that might be contradictory, right? How can you bring the temperature down if you're trying to focus on what you're perceiving as an attack on your way of life from a politically aligned group of people? I would say you've got to bring it to light. And I would argue that my Democrat colleagues do it all the time. Okay. So when I'm sitting there and they're in the majority, what are they doing? What hearings did they have? Do you remember? Violent right-wing conservative extremists, the ultra right-wing extremists. Go back and look at how many hearings we had in the Judiciary Committee or in the Oversight Committee, where they were trying to paint, all with the broad brushstroke, the ultra extremist right wing. Okay. They do that all the time, and it's a part of their DNA. Republicans tend not to do that. And all I'm trying to do is highlight, and to answer your question, bring to light these things that should paint a picture. The left always paints themselves as, we're the party of the people. We're the party of puppies and kittens and unicorns and rainbows. We love everybody. Aren't we awesome? Those crazy radical conservatives, the ultra extremists, they want to hurt you. They're nuts. They are hateful. And what I'm trying to do is say, guys, you've got a radicalized leftist Marxist group of individuals that want to actively undermine the American dream, the American way of life. And they say, well, that's crazy talk. Okay. Explain to me George Soros. Explain to me the Wren Collective. Explain to me the Southern Poverty Law Center. Explain to me Antifa. Explain to me 250 identified groups that were actively pushing people into the United States, violating parole laws and violating asylum laws, putting dangerous gang members that directly resulted in the death of Jocelyn Nungare, of Rachel Marin, of Laken Riley. I could go down the list. Those people need to be exposed. It wasn't just a one-off. It wasn't just some random illegal in Georgia. It wasn't some random illegal in Houston. It was a coordinated effort. And you say, well, Chip, some of those are just good, nice churches. They just want to help asylees. Okay, I'll spot you. There would be some actors in that mix whose motives aren't bad. I will spot you that. But I'm telling you, and it is almost definitively clear, but we need to expose how much it's interconnected, that there is a connected, funded, active group trying to do that. Like I said, the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund put out a report last week exposing the Wren Collective and all of the stuff on the criminal side. We need to bring all this together. And I think if you do that, to answer your question, the left is going to have to look in their own mirror about the stuff they say all the time about hate and about how all these crazy conservatives, they hate everybody. No, we just believe that order and the rule of law matter in our American way of life.
Awesome. Well, thank
We
you
have
so
a
much.
lot coming up, and we'll see you back in Washington.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. Sorry that that the dogs interrupted, but they've got their own minds. So there's Millie.
Oh, hello.
So cute.
They're welcome anytime.
Yes, they
I'll
are.
have them be our special guest.
I'll interview them next.
Well, appreciate it, guys. I got to go get breakfast tacos now.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
good
you
one.
for
Thank you
coming
so much.
Our first question is from Josie, and she asked, what happens in a government shutdown?
Oh my.
Incredible question.
Good one. A lot of things happen. So the first thing that happens, I would say that's the biggest thing that probably people who are not in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area will notice is that federal buildings, national parks will close. So, in DC, if you want to go to the Smithsonian, sorry, you can't.
Imagine having a vacation planned here
Ugh.
and all of the museums being closed.
And they're like, sorry, because Congress can't work properly. That would be so terrible.
I would be so upset if
I'd
I
be
was a
so
tourist.
sad. And I think that people who are traveling, I did when I was a kid, my family did the national parks west, driving in the car.
Yosemite, Yellowstone.
Yes, closed. Yes, so all that is closed. But there are other things that happen during a government shutdown that maybe a lot of people don't know about. So the one thing that does happen during government shutdown is Congress is still functioning. So a lot of people think, and kind of what we said earlier, they have to be, because they have to pass a bill to end the shutdown. So I think what we were saying earlier, that everyone pictures like a blackout happening all over DC until the government comes back online. That's not true. They can bring other bills to the floor. They can because members of Congress, they have permanent salaries. So they're not like federal workers. They're not furloughed. Their like salaries aren't cut off. They are still conducting legislative business. And their staff too. Anyone who is deemed essential staff is still running, full operational. So,
And they're probably working, or they will be working more than a typical week if the government does shut down, just like the two of us.
Absolutely.
I've gotten a lot of texts about plans, and I'm like, well,
I can make
I
plans
can come
for
if
all
the
of
government
October.
isn't shut down.
Yes. I hate that. I can't plan for weekends now because I have to say, oh, well, they may vote for a government funding bill that day, so I can't make it. Like, how lame is that? That's so sad.
I've texted so many people that I am iffy on plans because of a potential government shutdown.
How did this become our life? Anyway,
Moving on.
That's another topic of conversation. But yeah, there will be, reduced services for people who are living in DC and Maryland and Virginia. There will be reduced services at the Library of Congress. There will be, other buildings that may remain kind of functional because most buildings that are like under this appropriations process, their funding is in limbo, so they won't be able to do much. So I think that for people at home who are wondering how this is going to impact them, kind of what you were saying earlier, it's going to be places that you go to that you may not think of as government-run buildings. They will be shut down. You won't be able to travel to a lot of places that you want to travel to. But for the most part, Congress is still moving and grooving.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like I said, federal workers, their paycheck won't come in until the government shutdown ends. So it does make that kind of month to month hard if it does last a long time. You were talking about a bill passed in 2019.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that bill?
Yeah, so basically after the 2018-2019 shutdown, that was the biggest complaint, is that federal workers were they lost out on a ton of money.
Imagine
which is,
having to show up for work and then never getting paid for it.
yeah, that'd be terrible. And so they passed a bill. It passed through the House, passed through the Senate. It got signed into law. And basically, it was a bill that now says that all of their funds will be accrued, and then they'll get it back when the government isn't. So if they decide to go and just follow suit to their personality and break more records this year, we could see longer than a month of a shutdown. I mean, they put the CR, the deal, to November 21st because that was how much time they needed to get stuff done. Not to doomsday it, but you could see a shutdown till November. So we will be here every step of the way.
I do think that with federal workers having their paycheck come in later, I think that it'll help a little bit with everyday people not feel the effects of a government shutdown. I think that I remember during one of the previous government shutdowns that TSA workers are federal workers, and so if they were like, I'm not getting paid for this, I'm not going to show up for work, the TSA lines were long. I don't know why I remember that whenever I was 13. Maybe I was going
because
somewhere.
when you're 13, all you can remember is the fact that you wanted to get from point A to point B, and you didn't want to wait ever. And you were like, why is the federal? And I'm sure you as a 13-year-old were thinking, why is the federal workforce not working?
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm here. So that's a wrap for today's conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with us. Make sure to like and subscribe, send us your questions, and as always, make sure to read at WashingtonExaminer.com.